Let me start by asking a simple question. Have you ever walked into a store knowing exactly what you need? Maybe you've got your list in front of you, but then you walk out with much more than you planned on. Okay, that's behavioral science that we're going to talk about today. So, welcome to Centered.Live, and today we're going to talk about Paul, his experience in teaching a financial literacy class. Okay, and everybody knows that the milk and eggs are at the back of the store
True that.
to generate traffic, but what happens in between there? So, is this smart business? Are we being manipulated and taking advantage of our human weaknesses?
Yeah. And probably the answer to that question is yes and yes.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone, to Centered Live, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1. We're excited to kick off this new season with conversations that go a little deeper, ask harder questions, and help us all live with more intention in a noisy, fast-moving world. Today's topic is one of those that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And as Randy introduced, it's all about behavioral science and specifically how businesses are shaping our decisions without us typically noticing. So some of it's brilliant, some of it's uncomfortable, and some of it sits right on that blurry moral line where smart strategy starts to feel like manipulation.
Yeah, thinking back at my marketing classes in college
Mm-hmm.
years and years ago, we talked about some of these principles. And I don't think they were as sinister as maybe we think they might be now, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit. So behind the gap between the door and the milk and eggs, right?
Right?
A lot that goes on.
True. True.
So
Yeah.
cart size to start with.
Yeah, yeah, and truly, from grocery stores are one of the most refined decision-making environments that we encounter. They're designed not just for efficiency, but to influence behavior at scale, which is really interesting. And certainly, one of those foundational principles is exposure. And the longer a shopper remains in the store, the more likely they are to purchase additional items. Everything is placed very strategically
Mhm.
with intention, right? What's at eye level? What's above eye level? What's lower than eye level at kid level?
Right,
Okay,
right.
right? All of that. Um, and then when you think about how specifically grocery stores make their money, we might think that it's all about the products that we're buying. The reality is that every grocery store chain or grocery store, if it's an individual store, still sells the real estate of that shelf space. That's where they make the majority of their money. And so they are actually selling that position to specific brands and labels. And it's interesting how they balance that with price points as well as the deals. And all of this is not in any way, shape, or form happenstance. It is pure science. And it goes back
Hmm.
to that behavioral science. They are watching us and not like stalkers, although they are definitely watching us very closely.
They're not pushing the product into our cart and saying you have to buy this,
Right? There should be
but
a spring load.
almost right.
Yeah, right.
So I
Yeah.
mentioned cart size, and
Yes.
I think the average spending increases when you go. I think some stores, and we'll talk about Costco a little bit later, but think about the expanding cart sizes that you have that are more like a small truck as you're pushing
Yeah.
it into the
And
store.
sometimes you almost feel like you have to have a commercial driver's license to handle one of those
Right.
things.
So another is store flow.
True.
Have you noticed in some of the grocery stores you walk in that right as you walk in, it's kind of confusing. There's islands, there's displays and things that kind of get in your way, and as you're heading towards the tomatoes, you have to zigzag around things, and that's on purpose. That
Right.
by design.
As well as if you go over to the vegetable and fruits area, the coloring is also on purpose, very carefully laid out so that the brighter color items are the ones that catch your eyes. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, and you probably have, but I know that in Smith's and a few other grocery stores, Smith's being a Kroger store in our area here in Utah. But whenever there is going to be the water mist, they actually play a thunder track. And that's to actually is kind of like a warning to the customers that, okay, the water is about ready to go on. But they have gone as far as to flash some light. And and the funny thing is that what that does is it tells us that the vegetables and the fruits that we're looking at are fresh and organic. It's a subtle message that is designed to give us that picture perfect vision of the zucchini or the cucumber or the lettuce or the carrots or the peaches, or on and on and on. Right? It's truly a remarkable and highly successful and very highly money making.
Profitable. Huh?
Profitable. That's the word I was trying to go for. Thank you.
Well, and when you're talking about the profit margins of a grocery store, they have very fine, very thin margins on the actual product they sell. Like you said, they rent the space. Sometimes I've even walked into a grocery store and the person stocking the shelves doesn't work for the store.
Right.
They have a branded shirt on that they might be Coca-Cola or Pepsi
or Frito-Lay or what have you. Yes.
Exactly. So the big brands take the time to purchase that column of shelves and organize.
And then they know how to organize and display their bags or their boxes in such a way that grabs the most attention with our eyeballs.
Yeah, and talking about eyeball, there's vertical placing.
Yes.
Where, like you mentioned earlier, that the premium shelves are adult eye level.
Yes.
Okay, and then the lower shelves target children, upper maybe house generic stuff that's
right.
Lower margin. None of this is accidental. It's all part of the plan.
Right. And Randy, as you mentioned, as I taught this to my financial literacy students just a couple months back, I asked them, after kind of sharing this and opening it up to them, how did that make them feel? Did they care? Did it make them feel like they were being deliberately manipulated? And in truth, the response was from some, it doesn't matter to us. Even if we know that that's what they're doing, the point is that we go in for what we want and sometimes come out with a little bit more, and it doesn't bother them. Some definitely did feel like they had been manipulated. And I think that where that manipulation definitely starts to feel like we're being controlled is at the point where we overbuy. We are now buying something that we didn't go in for, but the marketing and all of its myriad tricks worked, and we're going out the door. And I'll have to tell you kind of a funny story real fast, is that on a couple different occasions, when the checkout person has said, did you find everything that you were looking for? And one of my answers is, oh, and a lot more.
Yeah.
And they smile. And I said, so I know about your evil plan. In a joking way. I had one clerk that got mad at me. She said, we're not evil. And I said,
yeah. That's right. Oh, that's funny.
But otherwise, when I've said that a couple other times, then the clerks laugh, and because they know They know. They're on the inside of the plan, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah, and we talked about the size of packaging, bulk packaging, and along with the larger cart, kind of subconsciously says this is a good deal.
yes,
But on occasion, I've taken the price per ounce or per
yes,
unit or whatever,
right.
compared it to, say, a Walmart or an associated food store, and find that Costco tends to be a little bit higher in some of those bulk packaging things. So it's just things you got to be aware of to be a smart shopper.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, when you talk about the tactic of bulk packaging and all of that, another is what we call visual scarcity. And that's where you are walking down the aisle and you see where shelves have not been replenished to their full capacity. And I see that almost always in Walmart.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things where it sends sort of a message. One is that, oh my gosh, if I don't get that last package right now, they're going to be out and I'll never be able to get it again. I mean, it's an oversimplification and an over assumption, and yet that's what our brains are doing, right? The other part of that is that when we look at that, it suggests high turnover, and there again, the perception increases the urgency. Even when we think, okay, I know that they're not out, they'll restock, and maybe they'll have more when I come back in the next time, which may or may not be true. But the point is that again, they are manipulating a perception within our brains.
Right. Right.
And just to big box stores reduce that navigational certainty, and we see that with places like Costco. Product locations rotate. Aisle signage is minimal. Shoppers can't form reliable mental maps, and you will notice that on a when I say regular basis, 2 to 5 years, the grocery stores will flip-flop everything.
Yep.
And if you get used to a Walmart in one location and you go to a Walmart in another location, it isn't the same map. Although they do tend to have 3, maybe 4 standard maps. And it's interesting that my local Walmart, as an example, has a, depending on where the yard goods and the home goods are versus the grocery, right? And then if I go to another one that's a few miles further, it's exact opposite of that. Right. Again, that is done with intention.
Right. And, you talk about scarcity on the shelf. They also use large open spaces. So you walk into a store and you see a large open space. And I think Harmon's does this, local grocery store, where you can walk in and you feel kind of cramped and crowded because you've got the displays and some specials going on at the front of the store. But then you head over towards the deli and all of a sudden, it opens up and you got this gorgeous deli with amazing food.
I've noticed.
It's in French, they call that la présentation et la moitié du goût.
Which means
presentation is half the flavor. So, when you're presenting something in an attractive fashion, it enhances the experience.
Right.
Now, these strategies sometimes can feel, what do I want to call it, customer friendly. But
isn't that interesting? That would be an element of the strategy to create. And you're right. I mean, it's, for example, the bread area, right? The bakery area. They want everything to smell good. They want it to look good. And certainly they will get rid of anything that doesn't meet a visual pleasant picture, right? And again, that spacing, the coloring, everything, they know how to play that precisely.
Yeah, and these grocery stores have been doing this for decades, 100 years
Hmm. Hmm.
of experimenting with different placement of
True.
products to increase their profit, even if it's 0.5%, get you to buy, one more loaf of bread, or, you know, grab that candy bar on your way out.
Evil, evil.
Yeah,
And it works because I've done it.
well, I'm standing in their line thinking, gosh, you know what? I could sure use a soda, and there's a cold one right
Right,
there.
right.
It's 3 times as much as getting one in the back,
Yes, yes.
but you know what? It's cold and it's there, and I want it.
Right, right.
Um, Another thing is odd pricing. I don't know if you've noticed on Costco in particular has 97 cents or 93 cents. Sometimes it's just the odd number gives you a perception of a better value. Now, why? I don't know. Maybe you know why. Why does odd numbering seem attractive to us?
You're right. And when we say odd numbering, as in like not a whole number particularly, and I don't mean mathematically specifically, but why is it 97 or 93 or even 98 as opposed to just, $2, $2, right?
Yep.
Instead of $1.97.
Yep.
And the answer is, again, it is a mental trick because we see the dollar and we think, oh, hey, look, that's $1, as opposed to us thinking, well, that's only 3 cents shy of $2.
Yeah.
And it works. It really works. What's interesting, and Randy, you probably know this, is that Europe doesn't allow that. European nations require that all of the grocery stores and other vendors actually, they're not allowed by law. They're not allowed to make that slight change and manipulate.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because here we allow it because America has been built on the concept of being pro business and not necessarily pro consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, um, we do that often with gas prices. You'll see it where it'll say 3.49.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and somehow that's better, tremendously better than 3.52, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or now we're finally into some reasonable, decent gas prices, but yet again, it's always there. It's always this idea that they're tricking our minds with the idea that it's not just a little less expensive, it's a lot less expensive. So if you were to look at a box of cereal and one says 3.49 and another one says 2.99, we automatically associate. We think, okay, well, one's $4, one's $2,
Yeah.
right? And it's yeah, it's all set up on that idea.
Yeah, and also there's bundling that goes on. So
Yes,
I walked
Costco,
into
of course, is the best at that.
right, right. But what I'm thinking of specifically is like Winco. I walked in and they
Mm,
had this big bin full of theater candy.
right,
It's five for $5. Okay, so you think, oh well, I need to buy five,
right,
but you really only have to buy one because the price is
right,
the same per each.
right.
So there's that little psychological boost to get you to buy more.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that's interesting is anchoring, as a key example, and that is that you've got, the first price we see kind of establishes the reference point, and then everything else in that area, right? Um, we judge it based on that first price that we come in and see, and so it's sort of interesting. And this is where you start to see, for example, name brands right next to a store brand, right? And the intent, of course, is that if we see the name brand and we see that it's oh, so significantly more expensive than the store brand, we're often willing to buy the store brand, not just because it's cheaper, but because again, we think of it as a better value. And in point of fact, often it is a better value. In fact,
Yeah.
if you look at Del Monte green beans versus Kroger green beans, chances are they are being canned in the same facility, but obviously going to different endpoints, or in some cases even the same endpoint. But again, um, that is, that's done on purpose. Where Del Monte gets its power, though, of course, is name recognition, and that name recognition being associated through marketing as a higher quality.
Right. Right. So after all of this behavioral science that we're
Yeah,
looking at, it's important to realize that behavior science itself is neutral. I mean, the
yeah,
ethical question about how it's applied might be different, but behavioral science as a study, as a group, as understanding, and I think as long as it doesn't cross the boundary of forcing us,
true.
is is okay. I mean, there's um, I don't know. That's my opinion. Is saying, yeah, this is just creativity in business.
And I think that for most of us, most Americans, first of all, Americans by nature, by general nature, are very much, we recognize that businesses need to make money and we encourage that. Some of us are stock shareholders, right? And we want those businesses to succeed. And so we benefit from higher values of stock value, right? And so we want that. We want them to be smart. We want them to do the marketing. We want them to know how to sell to the consumers. Um, what's interesting, though, is that this starts to become more of a moral or ethical question, at least, when we start to say, okay, but at what point maybe are we crossing a line? Now, let me give you an example of this. USA Today last week actually ran a big story on a grocery store chain back east called Wegmans, and they are using facial recognition. Now, what that means is that they are identifying the customer as they come through the door. Now, there isn't any indication, but it is possible to, and again, I'm using some hypothetical scenario here, but if you go into a Walmart now, they've changed all of their price displays into digital prices. So
Mm,
it's a small tag that's on the shelf, but it's a digital display, not a printed display. Okay,
mm,
and they can change that in a moment, right? In literally in the blink of an eye. And if that is connected wirelessly to a system that is allowing to say, oh, here comes Paul Malloy walking down the aisle, we're going to drop the prices a few cents and see if he'll buy on an impulse. And I see that price and I think, oh, that is a good price. So I snag it off the shelf, right? Whereas before I might not have been tempted as much because it's like the regular price.
mm.
That is a manipulation. And it's so interesting. In my last uh, job in industry, when I was working in the software industry, and you might remember this is before I became a teacher, I was working for an online metrics startup called Omniture. And
Mhm.
eventually they got bought out by Adobe because it was good. I mean, the technology and the coding was good to know about the online habits of their customers. Okay, and this could be applied to any customer on any website. One of the things that we were experimenting with was going beyond cookies, which identify a repeat customer, but then to be able to push specific ads to that customer based on what we knew of them in our database, which also meant that we could tell where they were coming from and where they went after they left our website or the customer website, and all of that tracked through cookies. When they came back, we could say, okay, the product that you bought last time needs to be updated. We'll give it to you at a special price just for you, and we know that you were thinking about it last time, but we're going to discount it extra deep, which of course might be a few percentage, but whatever it is, enough. I don't know if you've played around much with the Temu site, but
No.
if you their website and not having bought something, they immediately start sending emails saying, we just discounted this product, come back and buy it. Okay. Again, is that crossing some kind of an ethical line? You and I, before we started this evening, we were talking a little bit about Tom Cruise's movie called Minority Report. And if your viewers remember having seen that movie, you remember that he went by a clothing store in New York, or maybe it was Chicago, I forget which big city, but as he walked by, the window ads changed because they identified him through his eyeballs.
Right.
And then later in the movie, he has different eyeballs. He's actually had an eye transplant so that he can't be tracked by some bad guys. But he goes by the same store, and now it says, hello, Mr. Hayabushi, come in because we have some sweaters on sale just for you because that's what you bought the last time that you were in the store. Again, it's like, can we go that far? The answer is yes, we can. Should we go that far?
Well, some of that is very helpful. If you're actually interested in buying another product and you express some interest, whether it's on Google or you speak it into your phone and your phone hears you and plays an ad, some of that is actually helpful and beneficial, kind of spooky sometimes.
Right.
My wife and I were
talking. And I wonder if my Google Puck is listening, and the answer is yes. It is listening.
It is. It's gathering metadata, not personal data, right?
We hope.
But that sometimes that metadata is getting pretty specific.
It does. It seems to anyway. Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's talk about some strategies that might be helpful as people. First of all, is be aware, right?
Yes.
To figure out that, okay, this is happening.
Right.
I can go into a store and recognize what is happening. I think that's the biggest one, is to recognize that they are placing the products in a way that is encouraging you to buy and spend more money and buy, more, or whatever it is.
Right.
Okay?
But I love that because, as you point out, awareness restores agency. And once we really collectively we recognize the patterns, then we have regained our control over our decision making.
Yeah, and I made a list of a few items here that were just kind of practical things I've learned along the way that you're taught in basic economics class in college or high school. You go and you avoid shopping hungry or tired.
Yes, it makes a big difference.
Right. Or rushed. If you're feeling rushed, you're going to tend to buy what's convenient, not necessarily what's the best price. And like we talked about, you compare unit price rather than the package size. Sometimes my wife has her favorite granola. It comes in two different sizes, kind of it's a grocery store shelf compatible one, and then the monster package, right?
Right.
But if you buy that big package, it isn't always the same value as buying the smaller packages. So I found that if you buy the smaller ones and compare the price per ounce,
Hmm.
it's actually cheaper. And for us, it's a lot easier to put on the pantry shelf than a,
Right.
giant
And
box.
to that point, my wife and I have stopped buying a gallon of milk
Yeah.
because we don't go through a gallon of milk fast enough before it actually goes bad. And you might think, well, then you need to drink more milk or use more milk. And that's valid. That's a valid point. But in point of fact, what we learned is that we were almost always throwing away at least a quart, if sometimes not more, because it was going bad. Whereas a half gallon, yes, that volume price is better when you buy a whole gallon, but only by a few pennies. And the reality is that I can get through a half gallon container of milk while it's still fresh, and that means it's better for me.
Hmm. Yeah. And sometimes we think, well, the, the half gallon uh, is more expensive per ounce. But when have to throw away part of
Right,
that gallon,
right.
then
Same
that,
thing whether you talk about a pint of sour cream or half a quart of sour cream. It's the same thing. You
right.
know, am I going to end up losing some of it because it spoils and we need to throw it away, right? Same thing with a pack of cheese, whether it's grated cheese or sliced cheese. You have to think about, well, can I get through that much, or am I going to end up throwing some of it or even a fair amount of it away because I didn't get to it? I couldn't consume it fast enough.
Right. And as we've transitioned to empty nesters, our packaging has naturally become smaller because
Right,
we're not eating that much. And I think that's actually saving us money in the long run, that we have less spoiled food.
right.
We are, eating everything that we purchase. There's just more strategies like that. So, what are some other things that maybe you brought up in your class, or maybe your students brought up, as far as practical strategies of avoiding some of these behavioral science programming?
Well, for sure, when they're starting to flash, the bright colors and say sale, buy now, limited time only,
Blue
right?
light special.
Yeah. At that point, we should treat that urgent language almost like a warning signal.
Mm,
And we need to slow down and be more rational about what it is that we are looking at and choose more deliberately how we want to respond. And I think that also goes hand in hand with the idea that any unplanned purchase, which, when we talk about spur of the moment purchases, because the marketing plan is so well crafted,
hmm.
that we just need to take a moment and say, okay, do I really need this? So Randy, next time that you're looking at that cold beverage and oh my gosh, I could really go for that. Um, Maybe the answer is, you know what? I'm only 5 minutes away from home, and I can get a nice cool drink of water.
That's right. Yep.
I think all in all that these kinds of habits, like these easy practical strategies, I think they will all help us to be more, not just more aware, but I think it will impact our buying habits and therefore ultimately in the long run save money.
Yeah, and once we get in that habit of being a little bit aware,
Right.
we're going to be more economical in our purchases. And if we do slip up, and I think sometimes we do that when we have a period of relaxed purchases. Maybe we've got some extra money in our pocket,
Yeah.
and so you think, yeah, I can buy that Snickers bar, and it's not going to make that big of a difference, right? Um, but the next time you go, oh, I'm going to buy the Snickers bar and the Doritos. And the next time I'm going to buy, I'll buy the soda and the Snickers and the Doritos. You know,
Yeah.
it goes. So it's a constant battle to remind yourself to be efficient. to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and any of these little tips that we've shared can help interrupt that automated behavior, and that's I think the point of what we're trying to put across is that, let's be wise, let's be balanced. Doesn't mean that you can't ever buy a candy bar. Doesn't mean that you can't buy that cold drink. It just means that let's make sure that we're being realistic and we understand what our options are.
Right, and avoid the times when you go to Costco to upgrade your smartphone and come home with a brand new TV.
Yeah. Ah. Oh.
Guilty.
A confession there. Okay. Right.
So, just in closing, lots of things to consider here, but I think that awareness is what we've talked about as the best solution. Once you see the design, you stop blaming yourself and start making intentional choices on what you purchase and being aware of the behavioral science that's being used to encourage you to buy more.
And for sure, I mean, the whole point is to live with more intention, to have that balance in our lives, right? That centered living. And as we begin today and continue throughout this year with season 2, we will continue to explore awareness and ethics and self-leadership and how all of that intersects with everyday life. So everyone, thanks for joining us. We're just happy to be able to share some insights with you and hope that you find it valuable. And so if you do, to like and subscribe, we always appreciate that very much.
Thanks, and we'll see you next time.